So my topic today is hoping to answer the question, should you get vaccinated? And I'm going to look at some various studies and the facts as well as the overall narrative here. And I'm going to create a narrative of my own. And I hope that this will show people, who are not vaccine hesitant, at least they can understand a vaccine hesitant position without diving too far into conspiracy territory. I'm going to stick to only well-respected mainstream sources, and I'm not going to make any bold claims about motive or things like that regarding this vaccine. I'm just going to look at the facts and what we've seen. So should you get vaccinated? Well, when the vaccine first came out, we were given a statement, right? And this is what everybody said. They said the vaccine is 100% safe and 100% effective. And if these are two true statements, then yes, you should get vaccinated, right? If it is 100% safe and 100% effective, there's really no reason not to. But the thing is, are these statements true? Well, the first thing that brought some doubt to this was there were originally 4 vaccines, right? Johnson & Johnson, Astrazeneca, Pfizer, and Moderna. 4 big ones. There's a lot more than that across the world. But these two, Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca, within a month of being rolled out, they were both halted, recalled because of this rare blood clotting that was occurring in people who got those vaccines. So, apparently those ones are not 100% safe and 100% effective. But that's fine, because now Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are 100% safe and 100% effective. So there's really no reason to not get vaccinated, because those ones are good. But did it stop here? No. So then the next real revelation was the VAERS system. So VAERS, VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. So they started tracking this data and releasing it to the public, and we saw that there was plenty of listed adverse events, right, including several thousand deaths. But for the amount of people that were getting the vaccine, right, this death count was very low. But something to keep in mind was Harvard University, a very well-respected university, has done several studies regarding VAERS and its efficacy at actually tracking adverse events. And its reliability has been estimated to be about 10%. So if we look at the number that is on the VAERS website, 10% of that is going to be that number is going to be 10% of the actual number. So that's an estimate. So we could say we have a range here, right? If we have several thousand deaths, it could be up to 10 times higher than that. But even if that were true, it still isn't looking like the amount of adverse events is more than the chance of dying of COVID, right? So we have a 100% effective vaccine that is now only 99% safe, right? So we'll say that it's not entirely safe, right? There's some risks to this, but the risks definitely outweigh the benefits by a very wide margin. So then the next thing that happened was we started to see people who are vaccinated getting COVID, right? And this first was very prevalent in some celebrities, some sports players. We saw that they had some form of vaccine mandate on some of these teams, yet everybody on the team was getting COVID still. So this is very alarming to people. They realize, I'm vaccinated, but I can still get COVID. So is this vaccine 100% effective? Well, as far as stopping you from getting the disease, no. But then our talking point evolved, right? We said Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are 99% safe and 100% effective at preventing serious symptoms. So you might get COVID, right? But you'll be either asymptomatic or have very mild symptoms, right? Something akin to a mild cold. So once again, this vaccine is protecting you, and it is still very much safe. So the next thing we have here is there was a Massachusetts study of breakthrough COVID cases, and this study came from the CDC. So there's a large uptick in cases in Massachusetts, and 75% of the people in this Massachusetts case were vaccinated. Right? Okay, so we already knew that vaccinated people could get COVID, but now we see that they are accounting for 75% of the people in this one outbreak, right? And you can sort of write this off and say, well, yeah, as a larger percentage of the population gets vaccinated, a larger percent of the population who contract COVID are going to be vaccinated. That doesn't mean that the vaccine is ineffective. But they showed that these people in this Massachusetts study had equivalent amounts of viral material in their nose and throat as unvaccinated people, meaning that they were still capable of spreading the virus. So the vaccine is not giving anybody an inability to spread the virus, right? And so this attacks one of the main talking points that says, well, everybody needs to get vaccinated so you can have herd immunity. Well, if you have the exact same amount of virus in your system that is, easily spreadable to other people as an unvaccinated person, what exactly is this vaccine doing? How is it creating herd immunity? And then the last thing is the fact that of the people that were hospitalized in this Massachusetts study, there were 5 people hospitalized, and 4 of them were vaccinated. So 75% of the people who got COVID were vaccinated, and 80% of the people who were hospitalized were vaccinated. Now, this is a very small sample size, right? 5 people. But that still is beginning to show us that, is it really 100% effective at preventing serious symptoms? I don't think we can say that it is. So where does this put us now? So we have Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are 99% safe, but the benefits definitely outweigh the risk, right? We can't really say that it's 100% effective at anything, but we can say the benefits are still very much outweighing the risk. Now you have some myocarditis studies that come out. So studies indicate that young people, especially young men, are at heightened risk of developing myocarditis after taking the vaccine. And these numbers are especially alarming, especially given the fact that the death rate for COVID among young men is incredibly low. There is a definite risk to taking the COVID vaccine, as we can tell from these studies, but the benefit still outweighs the risk for these young people, and the myocarditis rates are very low. So we can say this vaccine is mostly safe, right? Can we really say it's 99% safe for every age group? No, but we can say it's mostly safe, and we can say that the benefits definitely outweigh the risks. So right now, should you not get vaccinated? I think you can still make the case that you definitely should. So now we'll come to the dawning of booster shots, right? So you have the Biden White House and Pfizer, the company itself, admits that the vaccine is not doing enough or anything, right? They basically say 2 shots is ineffective. So they're recommending a 6-month booster shot. And this is an even crazier thing, as Pfizer announces a pill that you can take to supplement the vaccine. So we have 2 shots of a vaccine. We're going to say that that's not useful. We need to have a 3rd shot. And is the 3rd shot even effective enough that we need? So this is not even effective enough that we also need a supplemental pill to really fight off COVID. So is there any efficacy to this vaccine at all at this point? Well, now the talking point is the vaccine will hopefully keep you from dying, even if it can't keep you out of the hospital. There's some serious side effects to consider, but at this point we still think that the benefit outweighs the risk. So now we have more myocarditis studies, and these ones were incredibly damning, I would say. So these new studies indicate that young men between 12 and 17 are getting myocarditis at up to a 6 times greater rate than the rate at which they get serious COVID infections. At this point, we can safely say there's not much reason for these people to get vaccinated, right? If you are a man between 12 and 17, or perhaps I should say a boy, if you're 6 times more likely to get myocarditis, which has I believe a 66% mortality rate, you're going to be at much higher risk of that than something like COVID, where the death rate for COVID among this age group is incredibly small, minuscule. So now we can say, for boys aged 12 to 17, vaccine risks definitely outweigh the benefits. But for people outside this range, vaccines are mostly safe, although largely ineffective, but the benefit still outweighs the risk, right? So are you a boy aged 12 to 17? Don't get vaccinated. Are you somebody outside this range? Then you can still make the argument that you should get vaccinated. Then you might have heard about this. There was an FDA hearing on booster shots. So the FDA did not approve or recommend booster shots for anyone outside of the high risk age groups, so 65 plus and the immunocompromised. And they cited plenty of studies that indicated that especially for young people who are at very little risk of dying to COVID, the risks very much do outweigh the benefits, right? We need further research on this. I mean, you have a myocarditis study that just comes out saying it's very dangerous for a certain group of young people. What other research is going to come out? So they do not recommend booster shots. So it makes you wonder, you keep hearing people say that this vaccine is totally safe. Well, it clearly isn't if the FDA itself is worried enough that they're not going to immediately approve a booster shot. In addition to that, there's new VAERS data that came out about the same time. Now, this new data, we have about 180 million in the country vaccinated, and there have been 700,000 adverse events. So adverse events can be anything, right? You could have mild flu or cold-like symptoms, but within this 700,000 number, there is 14,000 deaths and 20,000 cases of disability, right? People becoming disabled. And those are two very bad things. And there's plenty of other serious things within that 700,000. And keep in mind, this 700,000 is a very low estimate, right? We could use the Harvard data to say that this could possibly be only 10% of the actual number of adverse events that we are seeing, right? So knowing that, and we'll just take 700,000 as a low estimate. If you take 700,000 divided by 180 million, right? So our population who are double vaxxed, that gets you the chance of having an adverse event to be about 0.004%, right? So this seems incredibly low, right? But this is actually pretty much identical to the COVID-infected fatality rate. So what are your chances of dying if infected with COVID? Well, the IFR for COVID for the 0 to 34 age range, so anybody below age 34, is between 0.003 and 0.005%. So if your chance of an adverse reaction is 0.004%, that is basically equal to the chance of dying of COVID. So at this point, what can we say? Well, for boys aged 12 to 17, vaccine risks actually outweigh the benefits. For anyone under 34, risks and benefits are about equal. And for anyone else, vaccines are mostly safe, although largely ineffective. But the benefits still outweigh the risk, or that's what they're going to tell you, right? But we can use some critical thinking here, right? So in 8 months, we've gone from a vaccine that is 100% safe and 100% effective to a vaccine that is largely ineffective and largely unsafe. They still claim that the vaccine reduces death by COVID, but is this even possible to prove? I think it's virtually impossible to prove. Like, how can you take a person who has died of COVID, who is unvaccinated, and say, oh, well, they would not have died if they were vaccinated, and then take a person who didn't die of COVID, who was vaccinated, and say, oh, well, they would have died if they weren't vaccinated? There's really no way to prove this. The only real way you could look at this is look at infection rates of vaccinated versus unvaccinated, and then death rates among those who have the virus, right? And the most alarming part is some of those studies are coming out, and I will link one that came out in the UK, and it is actually showing that people who are vaccinated are dying at a much higher rate, right? Which would lend itself to the fact that this vaccine is doing a very, very poor job of preventing death, possibly worse than just having a certain amount of natural immunity, right? But data on this is still coming out, so we can't really definitively say, is it going to prevent you from dying, or is it going to make you more likely to die? The whole thing is we don't know, right? But even if we assume it's true, right, we don't know the extent to which it prevents death. Is it a 5% chance of reducing death, or is it a 50% chance? This would make a huge difference depending on what kind of adverse events that you're seeing, right? If you have a very large chance of getting myocarditis, is a 5% chance in reducing your chance of dying, is that worth it? I would say definitely not. So studies on this are not out, right? And the people who are vaccine hesitant, right? They want to wait for more research regarding this because there is none. But that's neither here nor there. The point is there's a trend to this data, right? We started at 100% safe and 100% effective, and have been consistently trending downward from there. So if we think critically, do we believe that where we are now is the end of the trend? So this slide of our newest talking point, we see how far this is from 100% safe and 100% effective. Is this the final stage? Is this where we're going to stop? Or is more data going to show that it is going to be increasingly less effective and increasingly less safe, right? So, we have a projection going on. I think we can make a pretty intelligent guess. So are we more likely to see a future study saying the vaccine is more or less dangerous for those in the 0 to 34 age group? Well, based on the pattern here, I would say a study would show that it is going to be more dangerous. The trend should indicate to you that the safety and efficacy of the vaccine will only be called into further question. So now we can say, should you get the vaccine? Well, let's look at these different age groups. Are you under 12? The answer is no, because the vaccine has not been approved for you, and even the CDC says no, right, because they haven't approved it. Are you a boy aged 12 to 17? The answer is no, because you have a up to 6 times higher chance of getting myocarditis from the vaccine than from dying of COVID, right? Yeah. So it does not really make sense for any man or boy aged 12 to 17 to get vaccinated. All right, well, so now that if you're neither of those two age groups, are you under 34? Well, then it should really be up to you. So if you have about an equal chance of getting an adverse event as you do of dying of COVID, then that should be a personal choice, right? And some people are against this whole personal choice argument because they still believe in this thing called herd immunity. But the vaccine does not give you immunity. It does not prevent you from getting the virus. It does not prevent you from spreading the virus, which has been proven in multiple CDC studies. So that's just a bogus reason. You're not protecting the elderly. You're not protecting the immunocompromised by getting vaccinated. This is a personal decision, right? Do you fear COVID more than you fear COVID side effects? Lastly, are you over the age of 34? Well, if you trust the current data, then you could say that the benefits outweigh the risk. Because once you're over 34, your chance of dying of COVID increases by a pretty wide margin. But that's if you believe that the current talking point is going to be our lasting talking point. Whereas if you think critically and wonder, where exactly is this trending, it would make a lot of sense for you to be somewhat hesitant, right? So if anybody is over 34 and they are vaccine hesitant, that makes a whole lot of sense based on the current trend of the data that we've seen. So what this narrative should ultimately show you is there really a single situation where a person should be forced into getting the vaccine against their own judgment? And the answer here is absolutely not. So the truth is that there's multiple situations where you absolutely should not get the vaccine, right? Why in California just now they started mandating school-age children get the vaccine, right? Well, if you're between age of 12 and 17 and you're a boy, how does that make any sense, right? There's absolutely no real way to justify that. And even in the highest risk age groups, the efficacy of the vaccine indicates that there is not really a significant benefit to society if many people get the vaccine, right? Herd immunity through vaccination, frankly, does not work, since the vaccine does not even make you immune. It does not give immunity. So there's no argument to be made that you are helping others. So this should be a personal decision, right? You should look at the data yourself. You should look at these studies that have been presented to you, and make an intelligent choice, as an individual. There's really no possible way I could see that you could justify forced vaccination.